sentence to Sean Diddy Combs, who he has ruled will spend 50 months in prison. So that's just over 4 years in prison for his crimes. Sean Combs has already been in prison.
Yeah, you heard that right. 50 months, just over 4 years. But fam, that sentencing was only the beginning of this story. Because what's happened to Diddy since he walked into federal custody just took a turn nobody really saw coming. We're talking about an actual physical incident inside that New Jersey facility. One that's already shaking up everything from his daily routine to the actual date he's supposed to walk out those doors. And listen, his transition into prison life was already rocky before any of this went down. Now we've got a fresh update his team can't just smooth over with a quick statement to the press. What's really going on with Diddy right now is a lot messier than any headline you've scrolled past today. So stay locked in, because we're about to break the whole thing down. Real quick, before we get into it, if you're actually trying to make moves in this industry, I put together an ebook that lays out exactly how I'd go about it. Not vague tips, actual steps. How to build a following starting from literally nothing. How you get labels sliding into your inbox instead of the other way around. And how people are getting paid in this business without ever touching a mic. And no, you're not late. Everybody loves saying the wave already crashed, it didn't. New names are popping off every week, and it's the ones who actually started that are catching it. It's $39, less than what you'd spend on takeout for two. Links in the description, go check it out, and let's get back into this. Alright, welcome back fam. Today we're getting into everything that's gone sideways for Sean Combs since he actually entered federal prison. This is a man who for almost 30 years was one of the most protected names in American entertainment, a billionaire who built his whole world from the ground up and lived at a level most of us can't even picture. And now he's sitting behind bars, dealing with write-ups, confrontations, and consequences that are changing what the rest of his sentence looks like. What's actually been happening to him inside that facility is a lot deeper and a lot more real than most people realize. Let's get into it. Now, to really get how far this fall is, you gotta understand how high this man actually was. Diddy wasn't just another success story in music. He basically helped write the rule book for an entire era of hip-hop business. Back in the early 90s, he started Bad Boy Records, and from there he built one of the most influential black-owned companies the industry had ever seen. He's the one who brought Biggie to the world stage. He's behind records that defined how a whole generation of hip-hop sounded. And he's a big reason the remix and that whole shiny suit era became a thing. But he didn't stop at music. Sean John turned into a real fashion label big enough to win him a Council of Fashion Designers of America award. He launched Revolt TV. He got into spirits with Ciroc. Dipped into fragrance, hospitality, all of it. Forbes kept putting his net worth north of $1 billion year after year. He picked up the Bet Hip Hop Icon Award. He was front row at Fashion Week, executive producing films. And his name meant something the second it walked into a room. This wasn't just a rapper or a producer, this was a brand, an institution. The kind of guy other powerful people wanted photos with. For almost 30 years, he moved through the world like the rules everyone else had to follow just didn't apply to him. Private jets, mansions in New York, LA, Miami, Atlanta, yachts off the French Riviera, tables at restaurants regular people can't even get reservations at. And the distance between that life and where he's sitting right now, it's honestly hard to put into words. And then it all came crashing down, and fam, this wasn't some slow fade out of the spotlight. This was one of the more dramatic public falls we've seen in entertainment history. Back in October 2025, a federal judge handed Sean Combs 50 months in prison after a jury convicted him on 2 counts of transportation for illegal commercial purposes, a Mann Act violation. He was acquitted on the more serious trafficking and racketeering counts. But the conviction that did stick was still enough to send him away for over 4 years. Once that sentence came down, the man who used to command attention just by walking into a room became federal inmate number 521111054. His release date, factoring in time already served, was first set for May 2028, then adjusted to February 2028 once good behavior credits kicked in. But as you're about to see, that date has been anything but settled. So here's where he landed. Diddy pulled up to FCI Fort Dix in New Jersey on the 30th of October 2025, just weeks after sentencing. Fort Dix is a low-security federal facility out in Burlington County, holding around 4,000 inmates. Let that number sit with you. This isn't some quiet spot where a famous face just blends into the background. 4,000 different people, 4,000 different backgrounds, 4,000 different ideas about how you're supposed to carry yourself in there. The facility is known for its residential drug program, And that's actually a big reason his legal team pushed for this exact placement. His attorney, Tenny Geragos, filed a formal request, asking the Bureau of Prisons to send him there so he could deal with substance issues and keep up family visits. But there was strategy behind it too. Inmates who complete that year-long drug program can get real-time knocked off a sentence. So on paper, Diddy was looking at getting out even earlier than that February 2028 date, if everything lined up. That was the plan going in. Reality had other ideas. Now, here's where it gets real. When Diddy first got to Fort Dix, he wasn't thrown straight into general population with the other 4,000 inmates. According to ABC News sources, he was placed in the facility's special drug treatment unit, a separate section for inmates going through that rehab program. That gave him structure, a routine, and some distance from the wider population. It wasn't comfort, but it was controlled, and it gave him something to work toward. Early on, his team leaned hard into the redemption angle, personal growth, quiet adjustment, staying focused. Photos that leaked out showed him in a gray knit cap, looking relaxed, mingling with other inmates in the common area. One of the guys pictured with him was former NBA player Sebastian Telfair, also a Brooklyn native, doing time at the same facility. On paper, it looked like he was adjusting fine. Behind that, cracks were already starting to show. Let's talk about what actually kicked off this rocky start, because the fight didn't come out of nowhere. It came after a string of smaller missteps. Only 4 days after landing at Fort Dix, on November 3rd, Diddy made a phone call that reportedly broke Bureau of Prisons rules. According to prison documents CBS News obtained, he called a woman to talk about visitation, and at one point asked about having $201 bills brought in, no clear explanation given for what that was for. Then, mid-call, he asked to speak with someone described as the digital person about putting out a statement, and the woman added a third unknown man to the line. That's the part that crossed the line. Federal inmates can only talk to people on a pre-approved list, and three-way calls are a hard no because of security concerns. Officials worry about people coordinating things outside or dodging monitored lines. When he got called out on it, Diddy reportedly said he never got the inmate handbook and didn't know the rule existed. Prison officials weren't buying it. They recommended pulling his phone and commissary privileges for 90 days. And here's the detail the internet couldn't stop pointing out: that write-up got filed on November 4th, his 56th birthday. His spokesperson, Judah Engelmeyer, pushed back, saying the call was actually initiated by one of Diddy's attorneys and protected under attorney-client privilege. But the paperwork logged it as personal, not legal. Either way, days into his sentence, and he was already in the system's crosshairs. Now, let's talk about the job situation, because this part actually deserves context. Shortly after arriving, Diddy landed a spot as a chaplain's assistant in the prison chapel and inside Fort Dix. That's genuinely one of the most sought-after assignments an inmate can get. The chapel's air-conditioned, gives you room to move around, and puts you around a calmer crowd. His duties involve keeping up the religious library, cleaning the office, organizing materials, and helping with services and record-keeping. His team confirmed the assignment and said he described the environment as warm and rewarding. Sit with that for a second. This is a man who used to run a global business from the 61st floor of a Manhattan high-rise, now organizing pamphlets and cleaning a chaplain's office. That contrast is about as sharp as it gets. But inside Fort Dix, that job was something other inmates actually competed for. And landing, it said something about how he was navigating the social side of things early on. For a minute, it looked like he had this figured out. Let's sit for a second on what this man actually gave up, because the gap between that old life and what he's living now is almost impossible to picture. Before all this, Diddy's day-to-day ran on a level most people will never touch. Private jets moving in between properties, no commercial airports, no lines, full-time chefs, housekeeping staff, personal assistants, security, stylists on call. He showed up to events where just him being there was the headline. That's a kind of freedom that goes way past money. It's freedom from schedules, from oversight, from ever really facing consequences. Inside Fort Dix, all of that is just gone. Every morning starts with a mandatory count, standing by your bunk while officers check numbers. Meals are whatever the facility's serving. Movement is scheduled and watched. Rec time is limited to certain spots at certain hours. Every phone call gets recorded and reviewed. Every purchase runs through a commissary system with hard limits. 30 years of autonomy just doesn't exist behind those walls, in any form. No assistant to handle problems before they land on him. No legal team down the hall. No security detail creating space between him and everybody else. No publicist managing how the story looks in real time. It's just him, a bunk, a cell block, and rules that apply the same no matter how many platinum plaques are attached to your name. The federal system was never built to accommodate somebody who spent decades operating at that level. And like we're about to get into, Adjusting to that reality has been anything but the smooth redemption story his team tried to sell early on. So here's where it gets serious. Multiple outlets, TMZ, ABC News, Fox News, Complex, are all reporting the same core story. Diddy reportedly got into a physical altercation with another inmate at Fort Dix. From what sources are saying, it started because the other inmate made a disrespectful comment directed at him. That remark is apparently what lit the fuse. Instead of walking away or letting it go, Diddy reportedly escalated it into an actual physical confrontation. Sources say both men were throwing punches and shoving each other before officers stepped in and pulled them apart. And here's the detail everybody online is talking about. Sources describe him as having held his own in the fight. But holding your own in a prison altercation and actually avoiding the fallout from it are two completely different things. And fam, the fallout here is real. Alright, let's get into the consequences, because they are not small. After the fight, prison officials reportedly moved Diddy straight into what's officially the Special Housing Unit, what everybody on the inside just calls the Hole. The Bureau of Prisons won't confirm specifics, telling reporters flat out they don't comment on conditions of confinement or disciplinary matters involving individual inmates, but multiple sources with knowledge of the situation say he was pulled from general population and placed in isolation right after the altercation. And solitary in a federal facility is exactly as rough as it sounds. You're locked in a small cell for basically the entire day, somewhere around 22 to 24 hours. No contact with other inmates at all. Rec time, if you get it, is alone, in a small cage or a small room. Meals come straight to the cell. No chapel job, no library, nothing. All of it suspended. Psychologically, that isolation adds up fast, especially for somebody who spent decades surrounded by people, studios, boardrooms, event floors, tour buses, constant noise. Research on solitary confinement is pretty consistent on this. Anxiety climbs, sleep falls apart, and that lack of any social contact creates a kind of pressure that doesn't let up the longer it goes on. For a guy who built his whole identity around being surrounded by people, sitting in silence in a special housing unit cell is about as far from his old reality as it gets. It's not just punishment, it's a full flip of everything his life used to run on, and it hits different than regular population time. The real question everybody's asking right now is what this means for his release date, and that's exactly where we're headed next. Now, here's the part everybody's actually watching, closest what this fight might mean for when Diddy actually walks out those doors. Before this went down, he was already benefiting from good behavior credits that had pushed his release date up, from that original May 2028 date to February 2028. Finishing the residential drug program could have knocked off even more time on top of that. Federal inmates who stay clean and stay active in programming can earn credits that speed things up, but violations, especially physical ones, put all of that at risk. The Bureau of Prisons can review those credits, pull back ones already earned, and adjust a release date based on documented incidents. And here's the part that's actually got people going back and forth online. According to the Bureau of Prisons' own inmate locator, reports say Diddy's listed release date didn't get pushed back after the fight. Several outlets are reporting it actually moved up again into late January or early February 2028. Nobody's fully explained that publicly, and it's leaving a lot of people confused, since that's not what you'd expect after a physical altercation. So take that with the appropriate grain of salt. The formal disciplinary hearing hasn't fully played out, and until it does, nobody outside that facility knows exactly how this gets weighed. Now let's talk about why the move into general population matters here. When Diddy first got to Fort Dix, remember, he was in that separated drug treatment unit, more structure, more distance from the main population. But at some point, he transitioned out of that unit and into regular housing, living day to day among the full 4,000 inmates. That's a whole different environment. Fort Dix might be low security on paper, but it's still a federal prison holding thousands of people from every kind of background and situation. When a former celebrity shows up, some inmates might show respect. Others might see it as a chance to make a name for themselves by testing him. That's a dynamic prison staff know well, and it's one inmates who've done real time know how to move through carefully. By all accounts, Diddy hadn't quite figured that part out yet. The phone call violation, the alleged alcohol reports which his team denied, and now this fight. Each one of these is a piece of a bigger picture about just how hard this adjustment has actually been for him. Now here's the bigger picture you'll need to understand. Inside a federal sentence, your behavior isn't just personal conduct. It's basically currency. Your disciplinary record affects your housing, whether you're eligible for jobs inside, your access to programming, and most importantly, Whether you qualify for the earned time credits that shave time off your sentence, inmates who keep a clean record, avoid conflict, and stay active in programming put themselves in position to walk out under the best possible conditions. Inmates who rack up violations, get into fights, and end up in the SHU are on a path that gets harder with every step. The system's built to reward staying out of trouble and penalize conflict, plain and simple. And every mark that lands on Diddy's file right now makes the road ahead a little longer and a little tougher to walk. So, let's put the whole timeline together. Because when you line it up, the pattern's right there. Diddy landed at Fort Dix on October 30th. Within 4 days, he was already in trouble over that unauthorized three-way call, which came with a recommended 90-day loss of phone and commissary privileges. He picked up the chaplain's assistant job, a genuine bright spot in an otherwise shaky start. Then came the alleged alcohol reports, which his camp denied. Then he transitioned out of the drug unit and into general population, putting him in daily contact with thousands of other inmates. Then, reportedly, another inmate disrespected him. That turned into a verbal back and forth. That back and forth turned into an actual physical fight, with punches thrown. Officers broke it up, and Diddy ended up in solitary, where he's reportedly sitting right now while the disciplinary review plays out. That's the sequence. One comment, one decision to engage, instead of walking away. And just like that, a release date already years off. Got even less certain. So what actually happens from here? Honestly, fam, it's still pretty unclear. The Bureau of Prisons is going to finish its review, and there'll be a formal disciplinary hearing in front of the institution's committee, where they'll weigh what happened and decide on sanctions. Those could range from extended time in the SHU to losing good behavior credits, programming access, or the work assignment altogether. Once that's done, we'll have a much clearer picture of what Diddy's immediate future at Fort Dix actually looks like. But even before any of that wraps up, this fight has already done something on its own. It's reignited the conversation around his incarceration in a way nothing has since the sentencing itself. Because this isn't about legal strategy anymore, or what his lawyers argue in front of a judge. This is about what happens once all of that's behind you, and all that's left is the actual day-to-day reality of doing time around 4,000 strangers on a strict routine with almost none of the freedom he used to have. At the end of the day, fam, what's happening to Diddy inside Fort Dix is a real reminder that federal prison doesn't care about your resume. It doesn't care about your Grammy noms, your Forbes number, or how many magazine covers you were on. It doesn't care how many hit records you dropped, how many celebrities pulled up to your parties, or how many zeros used to sit in your bank account. The system treats a billionaire music executive exactly the same as anybody else who walks through that intake process. Same rules, same wording counts, same disciplinary consequences for every violation, same uncertainty hanging over your release date no matter how high you used to fly. Sean Combs spent 3 decades building an image of a man who moved through life on his own terms. Right now, he's sitting in solitary confinement in a New Jersey federal prison with no staff, no assistants, no handlers, and zero control over what happens next. He's just waiting to find out how much this one fight actually costs him. That's where things stand, and based on everything that's played out since he walked through those Fort Dix doors, this is nowhere close to the clean, controlled rehabilitation story his team was trying to sell back in October. Life, on the inside, got harder for him, not easier. And how much harder it gets from here really depends on whether he can figure out how to move in an environment that's made it very clear it's not making exceptions for who he used to be. So, what's y'all take on this? Drop your thoughts on Diddy's situation at Fort Dix, and whether this fight actually changes his timeline, down in the comments. And go check out the video on screen for more content just like this.